the Learning and Development Podcast presented by 360 Learning. Hello and welcome to the Learning and Development Podcast presented by 360 Learning, and we are live. In this special episode, we put L&D myths on trial with an expert panel of Kevin M. Yates, Jess Almlie, and Becky Willis. Panelists, welcome. Okay, let's shift gears. Bear with me one moment. That should just do it. Hopefully I can still hear things. I'll just turn that up just in case. Welcome to the courtroom of learning truths, where familiar beliefs face the jury, you. I will introduce you one by one to your prosecuting attorneys, who will present their individual cases before we invite you to give your verdict. Being your judge, I will first call to the stand prosecuting attorney Becky Willis. Becky, please introduce yourself to the court.
Thank you, Your Honor. It is indeed a privilege to be here today. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm here to prosecute the myth that has plagued L&D for decades. My current LMS will solve today's challenges. This is a myth that is a dream or a fantasy that I can clearly debunk. Let's start with some research. Brandon Hall has told us that 56% of leaders do not believe that their current tech is fit for the modern workforce. And they say that over 45% of companies are looking for a new platform. I hear that every day. I need a new LMS. I need a new LMS. Do you? Let's face it, that old LMS will not move us where we need to go. It's a dinosaur. Some of those dinosaurs are all dressed up. They have AI. It's added in. Beware. A dinosaur with AI added in is like putting a wheels on a dinosaur. It might look sleek, but boy howdy, it won't do the job. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the fact is that the tech that most organizations have today will not allow the types of great things that we can now achieve. Let's take a look at what a few of those things might be. Align with the goals of the business. Make it easy to find, use, and share data. Easy for users, managers, and admins. Work with leaders, subject matter experts, business matter experts for real collaboration. Integrate in the flow of work. I don't think that one is a myth, by the way, Your Honor. Find, build, and address skills. Develop more than courses like practice, multimedia, collaboration, coaching, and skills. Integrate with other applications, HRIS, libraries, AI apps, all sorts of exciting things. And then personalize for each learner by AI at the core, feeding data to scarce skills and learning. Make life easier for managers to develop people. Take actionable data into a BI type of tool. Tie internal BI types of tools to show business results. And all of this can free up your team to do what they need to do, not just build the courses. This is a way that is much more than just adding an AI tool to build really bad courses. This is using AI tools to make it simple, integrated, based on data, and tying tools together. This new technology enables learning professionals to be learning architect. It's a whole new way of developing talent. It's a whole new way that will get L&D valued. This will set up a real talent development functions that partners with the business and will help you keep your job. Are you excited about that? Of course you are. But first, you need a new strategy. Move from creating and managing courses to solving business problems that drive business results. Now, folks, you know it's not just that simple, but I've given you my 7 steps. It's a guide to how you can develop a strategy that you need today. Start by getting executive buy-in, build a new strategy, and then update your technology. Modern AI tech is a critical piece to effective talent development. Yes, to get talent development strategy to work, you do need new technology. Tech with AI at the core. Tech that was easy to use, easy to manage, tech that integrates and fits into the flow of work. That, my friends, is not your current learning management system, is it? Nope. A dinosaur that was built to manage courses cannot do all of that. Now, some of you may be thinking, but we didn't select our dinosaur. What can we do? There are solutions, there are ideas, there's tech that can help you move into the age of AI as well on the back of your T Rex. So I say, deny that myth. Help, find, help, find help to move your L&D department from not being valued and cut to the age of AI. Align with the business, change your strategy, and update that dinosaur of an LMS. I rest my case. It's a myth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Becky Willis. A compelling case, no doubt. Now, we have no questions from the jury as yet that I can see, but we are very much welcoming those questions. But in the absence of any questions, we will put it to the jury in a poll. So the poll should be live. I will make sure that the court secretary makes the court. This is ridiculous, isn't it? Make sure the court secretary makes this poll live, and then you decide whether the case is guilty. You believe that the statement is true. Your LMS will solve all today's challenges, or B, not guilty. You believe the statement is false. Your LMS will not solve all today's challenges. We will give you a moment for that. There's still no questions in the chat here. Clearly, there's a lot of deliberation, no doubt. And at this point, I'd like to tell any of the audio listeners in the future listening to this that we are dressed up. And if you do want to see us in court outfits and me in a wig, then you might want to take a look on YouTube. And that is me gratuitously plugging our YouTube channel. But that's enough time, I think, for the deliberation. Adelaide, are you able to move things forward, or should I move things forward to the... maybe I can. Let's just try that. Here we go. Right. Okay. Becky, for the purposes of the court, we have, well, first of all, it's a split decision, but only just. The case is given not guilty. You believe the statement is false because the jury believes that their LMS will not solve all today's challenges. Or is that guilty? I don't know which one's the other way around. We have a clear case for that. So Becky, the jury rules not guilty, case dismissed. Next up, I'd like to call Jess Almlie to the stand. Jess, please introduce yourself to the court.
Hello to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury and those who also are participating on the court panel. My name is Jess Almlie. I've been in this learning and talent development field over 30 years, started as an orientation coordinator. Last corporate role was as a vice president of learning. And I did also write a book called L&D Order Taker No More, Become a Strategic Business Partner. So I've given a lot of thought to all these myths, David. I love this profession that we're in, but I am equally as skeptical of our ability to succeed. So let's move forward here. Shall I begin? Okay.
Yes, please do.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, pleasure to be here with you today. The prosecution would have you believe that L&D's highest value is obedience. Take the order, build the training, move on. Today, I'm going to prove this statement is false on 2 counts. The first, that a request for training isn't necessarily what's needed. We must focus in on what leaders in organizations really want, not the request itself, but the reason behind the request, if you will. Because do leaders really want a workshop, an e-learning, a development program, or do they want their talent and performance challenges to disappear, their problem solved? I remember my own turning point as an young L&D leader when it came to this argument, because you see, I used to believe that a successful L&D professional created really great training products. We use all the best practices, engaging, interactive, all of them, and all the learning principles. And it's true that we do and we should create high quality work, always. That itself is not in question. It's not about what we produce as much as when we produce it. The turning point for me happened. I sat down with my stakeholder. I'm going to call her Linda. Linda looked me straight in the eye and she told me, Jess, your team's training was not good enough. And I was confused because I knew that training was high quality. I had seen it. And it spoke directly to Linda's original ask, even meeting the learning outcomes that she outlined from the beginning. On all accounts, that training was perfectly designed. The problem was, it would never have solved Linda's actual problem, even though she asked for it. But here we were, being blamed for the failure of a well-designed, fantastic training. And that's when I realized it is not enough for L&D to spend all of our time perfecting our products. If I had been savvy enough to dive deeper into Linda's actual problem before creating such a fantastic training, we likely wouldn't have created a training at all. We would have recommended alternative solutions, and Linda would have been happier. Her problems would have disappeared. Like most stakeholders, Linda came to me requesting training as a solution, but she did not describe the actual problem. Our stakeholders want their problem solved more than they want a training created. Our value is not in fulfilling requests, it's in partnering with stakeholders to define and solve their performance problems, even if that means a training is never created and we redirect to an alternative solution. But there is an even bigger crime here. Because let's assume that all of our stakeholders figured out exactly when training would solve a problem and only requested it when it was really needed. The myth is still wrong. Why? Because L&D does not exist to obediently respond to requests. L&D exists to help the organization achieve objectives through its people. That is why companies pay the salaries for entire departments of learning and talent development professionals. And organizations are, in and of themselves, strategic entities. They exist for a reason. They have objectives they want to achieve. And usually these relate to providing the world with products or services that meet a need or solve a problem. The objectives may relate to improving the product or service, increasing revenue or reach, achieving a particular goal, for example. Organizations are constantly working to figure out strategically the best way to achieve these objectives. And there is almost always a people component to success. People are a large part of achieving any organization's objectives. Yet people don't come to the organization fully wrapped up with a bow, ready to go. And they don't magically have the skills and expertise to achieve any objective thrown at them, especially in today's constantly changing world. People are tricky creatures that way, but we are also malleable. By learning and developing, we can acquire the skills and expertise that we lack, whether it relates to technical and functional skills, leadership skills, collaboration, communication, and more. So I'll say it again, L&D exists to equip, enable, and develop the skills and expertise people need in order to achieve the organizational objectives. L&D closes the gap between people and organizational goals. But yet, time, money, and resources are limited. In any organization, these aspects are finite, and we cannot do everything. Therefore, L&D must make strategic choices about where to invest our efforts, where to invest our own time, money, and resources. If we only respond to leader requests for training, we default to first come, first serve strategy, or even worse, loudest voice strategy. But the first request and the loudest voice aren't necessarily the most important need. Therefore, a quick and simple yes to any request is powerful and it cannot be taken lightly. There is a no inside of every yes. Every time we say yes to one project, we are saying no to something else, whether or not that no is intentional or spoken out loud. Saying yes to projects that do not move the needle on organizational objectives may mean we don't have the time left to work on the projects that will. So the question isn't whether or not we should help leaders. The question is whether we are saying yes to the work that creates the greatest organizational impact. And that type of yes requires us to work strategically, in partnership with the business and not transactionally, responding to requests. Members of the jury, this myth fails on 2 counts. First, leaders don't come to us because they want training. They come to us because they want results, and the results that come when problems are solved and not masked. And secondly, if we only follow requests, we abandon our strategic responsibility to move the organization forward through its people. Instead, we sit only as reactive order takers. Successful organizations are strategic. L&D exists to support organizational success. That means our job is not simply to deliver what is requested. Our job is to determine where and how we can create the greatest impact to move the organization forward through its people. Sometimes that will mean delivering the requested training, sure. Sometimes it will mean recommending a different solution. Sometimes it will mean focusing somewhere else entirely. Therefore, L&D's value does not lie in delivering exactly what leaders request. Our value lies in helping the organization achieve its goals through strategic performance improvement and capability development. I rest my case.
Thank you very much, Jess Almlie. Another compelling case. Before we get to the jury to decide, jury members, please, you should be deliberating now. We do have a cross-examination question from a jury member, Samantha Cole. Jess, how are L&D educating leaders so they have the skills to what they want, to ask for what they want?
Yeah, I really think that this is partly our responsibility as well, because our leaders, for the most part, got to their seat because they're good at solving problems. And they like to solve the problem and move on, for one thing. And secondly, our leaders are not going home at night thinking about how learning and talent development can be better. They just want their problem solved at the end of the day. But there is a way that I believe we can train the business without training the business. If we start to do the small things that will help them to begin to think differently. And it's a process, a change process. This isn't an overnight, and it's not a workshop. This is something where every time I'm talking with a stakeholder, I may be asking one different question than I've asked before. Or I may even warn them. I may say, hey, today I'm going to ask you a few different questions. And just bear with me. What I have found in my own experience is when we are able to do that, and we come up with, even at the end, if we come up with a recommendation that training won't solve the problem, those stakeholders become my strongest partners, because they come back to me then saying, hey, you're the one in the organization that can help me solve the problem. And yes, sometimes that problem can be solved with training, but sometimes it can't. And they're not even disappointed at that point that we didn't provide the training. But it does take a while to get there. So it's a process over time of training the business to think differently about how they approach us with requests. I found quite often it happens one person at a time.
Thank you, counsel. We have another question from the jury. Jude Almeida, don't leaders ultimately determine how L&D performs by doing what is needed? And if they don't, doesn't that affect the effectiveness of their operations?
Yeah, it can. And I do know of leaders who come with their heels dug in, thinking, this is the solution, this is what I need. Now, in those instances, when I'm an internal leader, I will take that order because I have to. Like the C-suite's already signed off. This has happened to me in my past. But I will at the same time say something to the effect of, this is great, I'd love to do this, but here's my parameters in return. We're going to do a full analysis afterwards, for example, to figure out what the real problem is. We're going to measure the results to make sure that we got what you really needed, those kinds of things. Or I will look to find the opportunity within that order to make a shift, even in a small way, in that stakeholder's thinking about how to best work with learning and talent development. Because ultimately, yes, if we spend all of our time creating a training that is fantastic, as my team did, and it does not solve that stakeholder's problem, then they're going to come back and they likely will point the finger of blame right at us. And yes, there are some leaders that it's going to take longer for them to realize that there's more to this than deliver a training, check the box, and move on. But I believe if we stay in that check the box and move on, then we are a transactional entity that is missing out on what organizations need, which is to solve their talent challenges so that they can move forward. Learning and talent development is the group in an organization that can do those things, that can solve the talent challenges. And so I think, yes, it depends on who the stakeholder is and how we work with them over time to help shift their perspective. And it isn't an easy switch. So I hear what you're saying.
Thank you, counsel. Now, members of the jury, it's up to you to decide. Let us know if you believe our value doesn't only lie in delivering exactly what leaders request. So it will be A, guilty. You believe the statement is true. Our value lies in delivering only what leaders request. And B, not guilty. You believe the statement is false, or value does not lie in delivering only what leaders request. And while the jury is deliberating, counsel, one more question. Euridia has asked, how do we go about leaders who are more reactive and are not open to change or innovation?
Yeah, David, I saw this one in here too. I was just wondering if I should reply in the chat. So I'll make a couple notes here. We as an industry, overall as a profession, we have operated in this take the order, deliver the request for a long time. And so that is often what is expected. That's how our stakeholders believe that they should work with us, because that's the only model that they've ever seen. And what we are talking about here, I think this is really important. We are not just talking about a process change for learning and development. If we sit and we think about this as if we just do our work differently, then we will be able to be as strategic partners to the organization. It's not going to happen that way. Yes, there are processes we need to change, but what we are really talking about is a cultural and mindset shift for everyone else in the organization. And when we talk about cultural and mindset shifts, we're talking about changes that need to happen over time, a little bit at a time. And so when we're talking about leaders who are more reactive, they're not open in the beginning to change or innovation. We start exactly where they are. We pull up our chair, our figurative chair, to the same side of the same table. And we get in it with them about talking about their problems and building a relationship and all of those things. But we take the order. We say, great, I will take that order. And then we find the opportunity in that order to slowly make a shift in just even a very small way. Perhaps we add in measurement when it wasn't asked for so that we can show different results than they would expect. Something more than just a completion rate, something that shows that their quality scores have moved the needle or whatever's important to them. And then we add in something different a little bit next time. The way we make this change is we crack the door a teensy bit at a time. One little piece. We start exactly where they are. And then as that door gets wider and wider open, eventually they will want that bigger and more effective impact. But it won't happen overnight, and it won't happen by us swooping in and saying, we're going to change and work differently.
Thank you, counsel. Let's move to the jury's deliberation. We can see that we have one guilty or a very small amount guilty, but overwhelmingly the jury has voted that the case is not guilty. You believe the statement is false. Our value does not lie in delivering only what leaders request. I think that was a very compelling case. Jess, thank you very much. And case dismissed. So before we move to the next case, I will ask you if you could write in the chat again if you do have any further cases that you would like the prosecuting attorneys to discuss on your behalf. I'd imagine that there will be time after today's scheduled cases that we'll be able to bring those to the prosecuting attorneys. But before then, may I call Kevin M. Yates to the stand, who I believe is also an L&D detective as well as a prosecuting attorney. I'm not sure how that works. Kevin, please introduce yourself to the court.
Thank you, Your Honor. It is certainly a pleasure to be here today as the L&D detective. I am Kevin M. Yates and have worked in training, learning, and talent development now for, a little over 30 years. The work that I have been focused on is investigating how training and learning as an experience and L&D as a function is measurably contributing to workplace performance. And so today, I will be addressing a myth. David, if we'll just go to that next screen. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the charge, impact measurement requires complex, large-scale evaluation. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, as the L&D detective, searching for facts, clues, and evidence that reveal the extent to which training and learning as an experience and L&D as a function is measurably contributing to workplace performance is what I present to you today. As I stand here before you today, I am excited to report that I stand on the precipice of great joy. At the same time, ladies and gentlemen, I share with you that I am also on the precipice of sadness. I'll start with where that sadness comes from. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I am saddened to know that even today in 2026, we have L&D practitioners who are continuing on the paths of failure to measurement because of legacy thinking and because of legacy habits. At the same time, ladies and gentlemen, as I shared with you earlier, I am also filled with a great sense of joy and excitement, knowing that while there are some who are stuck in old ways and old habits of measuring impact, there is a transition, there is a shift, there is an awakening that we can measure the impact of training and learning on workplace performance by adopting new mindsets, new methods, and new tools. Ladies and gentlemen, I contend that it need not be complex. I contend that it need not be difficult. But ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I know and I believe, because I have not only done the work, but seen the work that says we do not need to over-architect. We do not need to over-orchestrate the ways in which we measure how training and learning as an experience and L&D as a function is measurably contributing to workplace performance. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that we need to abandon the use of LMS data as a way to reveal impact. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I contend that we need to cease using smiley sheets and surveys as a way to measure impact. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, let me be very clear. There is value in LMS data. There is value in survey data. But what it will not ever do, ladies and gentlemen, is reveal how training and learning, the L&D, is measurably contributing to the workplace performance ecosystem. When we focus on performance as an outcome for training, learning, and talent development, we know that we are focused on the right thing and focused in the right direction when it comes to our measurement efforts. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to share with you that I have something that may be a surprise to some, maybe not as much a surprise to others. And so, ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about large scale, complex evaluation, we need not do that. There are metrics, measures, key performance indicators that are already in place in the businesses, agencies, and organizations we serve, ladies and gentlemen. We do not have to make them up. They already exist. And so when we think about what matters most to the business and what we measure, we need to align with metrics and measures like time, quality, market share, errors, call retention rates, customer retention rates. Ladies and gentlemen, these are not complex measures and metrics and KPIs. They already exist. And so when we are working to impact the workplace performance ecosystem, we should be using those business performance metrics as our North Star, not our LMS data, not our survey data. While they provide valuable insights in the right context, ladies and gentlemen, as I said earlier, they will never give you insight into performance impact. It is a false narrative. What we have the opportunity to do is start our conversation with what business performance metric do we want to influence? Do we want to contribute to the movement or the maintenance or the stability of that business performance metric? When we align purposefully and intentionally with business metrics, when we create training, learning, and talent development solutions that have potential and power to influence the movement or maintenance of those metrics, we are providing an incredibly valuable service to the organizations we serve. Not only that, ladies and gentlemen, we need to remove the myth that training alone can fix it, that L&D has magic dust and magic wands and secret formulas and potions that can fix everything on its own. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that is a myth. Combined with other influencers and contributions in the workplace performance ecosystem, training and learning as an experience and L&D as a function has potential and power to contribute to human performance, contribute to business performance in ways where we can measure collective contribution versus isolated efforts. So measurement need not be complex. Measurement need not be difficult. We should seek out those business performance metrics that matter most to the business. Those business performance metrics that give insight into how business strategies and initiatives are being met or not. That is our focus area. That is what we should be focused on, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. And so I want to close by saying, when we think about training, learning, and talent development as part of a universe that is made up of a workplace performance ecosystem, we consider what is at the center of that ecosystem, ladies and gentlemen, that is business goals. And if we want to measure impact, if we want to measure our contribution to business goals, we need to be focused on the business metrics and business measures that matter most to the businesses and organizations we serve. Ladies and gentlemen, I rest my case on why we do not need complex, difficult, hard to understand, complex evaluation system.
Thank you, counsel. Another compelling case. We have some questions from the jury who would like to cross-examine your case, Kevin. First of all, from Darlene, do you believe it needs to be, wrong one. Mariah, how can we get feedback if we do not get evaluations?
How can we get feedback if we do not get evaluations? That's a great question. And we do need feedback. And so I want to restate that there is absolute value in survey data. There is no value in reporting survey data as impact data. And I define impact as the extent to which training, learning, and talent development is immeasurably contributing to business goals. So do we need evaluation data, survey data that gives us insight into employee sentiment, thoughts, opinions, and ideas? Absolutely. Absolutely. We do need that qualitative data. What we really want to focus on when we're measuring actual performance impact is the quantitative data that comes from using business performance metrics and business performance KPIs. So again, I want to state that because I want to make sure that I'm clear when I say LMS data is valuable. Survey data is valuable because of the insights that it gives. But what we cannot do is use LMS data and survey data to report performance.
And Kevin, we do have another question on LMS metrics. Can you speak to the use of LMS metrics to discern impact when an organization has little to no performance metrics in place?
So I believe it's important for us to contextualize our stories. And that question is very relevant, very valuable, and it speaks to the challenges that we have in the organizations and businesses we serve with getting access to that data. So if, as far as we can go, is LMS or survey data, then we should provide those insights. But we have to contextualize the story and the narrative when we're using LMS data and when we're using survey data. So we want to contextualize it to say LMS data gives us really good insight on how we are operating as a function in the organization. Survey data gives us really good insight when it comes to what our employees are thinking about their learning experience in the organization. So we have to contextualize it that way. And we have to finish that story by saying what we don't have is the kind of data that shows us how we are moving or maintaining the needle on workplace performance. And then we can have further discussions on how do we get access to that? How do we gain insight to that, right? So in the absence of that data, let's tell our stories using LMS data. Let's tell our stories using survey data, but let's make sure that we are contextualizing those stories and that we are not trying to position those stories as stories that we can tell about performance impact, because LMS data and survey data will not get.
Thank you, Council. I will invite members of the jury to vote in a moment. And then whilst they're voting, Council, I will ask you another juror question. So the charge, impact measurement requires complex large-scale evaluation. If it's guilty, then it's A, you believe the statement is true. Impact measurement does require complex large-scale evaluation. If you believe it's not guilty, then it's B, you believe the statement is false. Impact measurement does not require complex large-scale evaluation. And while the jury are deliberating, Kevin, a question from Jews. Don't we rely on multiple metrics to evaluate training impact, using them as indicators to draw meaningful conclusions about the effectiveness and business outcomes?
Would you repeat that question again, David?
Yeah, absolutely.
Your Honor, I'm sorry.
You're wrong. Don't we rely on multiple metrics to evaluate training impact, using them as indicators to draw meaningful conclusions about effectiveness and business outcomes?
Yes, and I hope that I am answering this question within the context for which it was asked. Should we abandon LMS data? No. Should we abandon survey data? No. Is there other data that helps tell a story of an impact? There absolutely is. And so in weaving our story together, there are multiple data sources that we can use if we are telling a full end-to-end story. Absolutely, we can do that. Where we need to take caution is calling an egg an apple. And here's what I mean by that. I'm repeating myself. LMS data is not performance impact data. Survey data is not performance impact data. Can we use LMS data and survey data as part of the end-to-end story about how L&D is measurably contributing to business goals? Absolutely. So multiple data sources do help us tell the story from end to end. The idea here, though, is that we need to be very clear. We need to contextualize our story based on the data we're using. And quite frankly, I'll say it again, we have to stop calling LMS data and survey data performance impact data, because it is not. It is part of the story, but it is not telling a story about performance impact. So to answer that question, yes, there are multiple data points that we can use to tell our story of performance impact, but we need to tell that story end to end, and the story needs to end with business performance data that then shows actual impact on performance.
Wonderful. Thank you, Council. So let's go to the verdict. We can see that this really has split the jury 29.2% believe that it's guilty, that the statement is true. Impact measurement does require complex, large-scale evaluation. And 70.8% of the jury believe the statement is false and impact measurement does not require complex, large-scale evaluation. In either case, I think that's overwhelmingly not guilty. And on this case, I'm going to say case dismissed. Okay, we do have further cases that have been brought to the court, so we will deal with these in as an efficient manner as possible. The first myth that we have is something is better than nothing. This myth is used to justify box checking, inadequate ADDIE, outdated modalities, etc. I'd argue that ill-prepared, inadequate, and/or ill-delivered content does more damage than nothing at all, because learners then distrust the entire training catalog. I will call prosecutor Becky Willis back to the court to give your verdict on this myth.
I'm sorry, David. I was reading the chat. So something better than nothing. You know, I do think it does more damage. And I apologize for not introducing myself at the beginning. I was so excited. I have this lovely book called 7 Steps to Better Learning Engagement Driving Business Results. Business results is a real important thing that I think all of us would definitely agree upon. Something better than nothing, I think, does more damage. So if you have a really boring compliance e-learning that's going to take 20 and 30 minutes, and it's pretty hard to find on your LMS, and it's click the box and all that, what are people going to think that L&D is? It's going to think it's this boring e-learning, bad kind of stuff, I think. So I agree that something is not the answer to everything. I think being a learning architect, you know, we've come with a lot of decisions, a lot of titles for all of us about what we're doing. But if you look at what Debbie Richards has done in a TD at Work, talk about learning architect, we can do better. We can do better from an LMS standpoint. We can do better technology. We can think of just working with the leaders that are involved in it. We can partner with them better. It has nothing to do with the seat at the table per se, but partnering and then marketing what we do and marketing our solutions to solving business problems. So I agree.
Thank you very much, counsel. Would anybody else like to add any more to that, or are we quite happy? Yes, yes, Jess.
Yeah, I want to say that yes, I'm a complete agreement with Becky in that it can do more damage than good. I also want to say that when you are in that moment and somebody says something is better than nothing, the C-suite is signed off, for example, you're going to do it anyway, it's really hard to push back. And this is not saying that we shouldn't push back. It's just saying we may need to take a different tactic, because I've definitely been in that seat before. Now, one of the things that I think I was able to do was, and this is where measurement comes in. And so maybe, I don't know if Kevin will want to add to this as well, but we did a check the box training. I knew it wasn't going to solve the problem, but I was told there was no option to say no or push back. And the business was desperate. They wanted a Band-Aid to stop the bleeding. And what we ended up doing was putting the measurement in place so that at the end, we showed that training really didn't have an impact. Now, in some ways, that could come back to bite us. But instead, what it did was I paired that actually with an analysis then and said, let's figure out what the problem is and what will solve it. Now, at this point, now that we're past we put the Band-Aid on, we felt like we stopped the bleeding, we're past this point in the business where nobody can take a break to eat their lunch or anything else during the day. They weren't as panicked. And I said, let's think about this now in a logical way. How can we change it at this point, given that our measures now are showing that we did everything we could and it didn't make a difference? And the business knew this too. They knew that it hadn't worked. And so they were more than happy to figure out how we could change it in the future. And so I think, yes, it can do more damage than good, but sometimes we also don't have the option to push back in the moment And that means we don't let it go. We need to come back later and have a different conversation. I don't know, Kevin, do you have anything to add?
I do have something to add. And the most exciting thing here is that Becky, Jess, and I are totally aligned. And I love that Jess was transparent about her experience, because I'm going to be very transparent about mine. Over my 30-year career, there are many, many times where I knew that I was asked to deliver a learning solution or training program that would have zero value and zero impact. And it was because it was an initiative that was signed off and there was an expectation by the C-suite. I have learned to be empathetic to the C-suite, right? And here's how I've learned to be empathetic. Quite often, particularly when it comes to training and learning, they just want some type of tangible evidence that we did something, that there was an effort made to address an issue or a problem. And then a training program becomes tangible evidence that there was an effort to do something. The missing piece is that there was no effort, Jess and Becky, to say, hey, wait, we know we got this problem, but maybe training isn't what we need, right? So I have been in so many situations where I have been asked to do something and I did that. I have never adopted and I told you so. But what I have done, because I feel it's my responsibility to do so, is at the front end, if I know and I'm clear that this is something we need to do to produce evidence that we did something, then I am educating stakeholders, business partners in a very respectful, we're headed for doomsday type of way to say, I understand that this is immediate, that this is urgent. Here's what we're going to deliver. At the same time, I want to be clear about what the expectation is for what the outcomes will be. So I have to tell the truth about that. I have to do that. That is my responsibility as a learning and development professional, to tell the truth. So again, it's not about saying you guys are headed down a path of doom and destruction because this isn't going to work, but it is about respectfully articulating what we can expect and what we can't expect. And so that's my position on doing something versus doing nothing. As Jess and Becky have said, sometimes doing something could be very dangerous and hurtful and harmful. And in those instances, we need to be clear. It is our responsibility to say, got it. No, we got to address this right now because this is urgent. We need to demonstrate with some type of tangible evidence that we've done something about it via training and development, but be very clear. Here is an expected outcome for what we're doing today. This is what we can expect, and here's what we cannot respect. And I have found that if you do that tactfully without an I told you so type of disposition or attitude, your voice will be heard. As a matter of fact, your voice will be appreciated, because then you've managed expectations to say, okay, we're going to do this, and here's what we can expect, and here's what we can't expect.
Brilliant. I think it was unanimous then as a prosecuting group. Now, one final one, and I would like to make this quick fire, starting with you, Becky. SCORM is outdated and outweighted.
Whoa. I do think that SCORM courses are boring. I'm so sorry. It has solved the problem. It is a universal thing. It's an easy way to get things done, but we can do better now. The fact is that a lot of the AI tools that create content create SCORM, and they can do better with coaching. We can do better than SCORM, but it makes our life easy. We just need to think outside the box.
And anybody like to put a counter argument to SCORM? No. Okay. Then as we look to wrap up court proceedings for the day, I would like to come back to the panel for closing reflections on how we might recognize ideas that are no longer useful. So the ultimate myth-busting advice. Jess, perhaps I can come to you first.
Yeah, I want to say that, we need to match our external to work environment, learning environment, to the best we can to our internal to work. I saw this with my own kids growing up. We were in the learning and talent development business. We were putting out e-learnings, we were doing courses, but they were watching YouTube. And so now as we move forward, just let's pay attention and keep our critical hats on as to, is this working? Is this what the way that we, even yourself, consumes information right now versus the way that we are doing it internally, if that makes sense. So let's just keep our critical eyes open to ensure that what we're doing is having an impact and it is working in a way that makes sense to the people that we're serving.
Thank you, Jess. And Kevin?
Yes, I'd like to leave our jury and our audience with the idea that it takes a village to impact workplace performance. And so when we're measuring impact, we need to not be thinking about what training and learning as an experience and L&D as a function did in isolation on its own by itself, but rather when we are measuring impact, we need to be thinking about all the contributions that there are in the workplace performance ecosystem. When we consider collective contributions and we adopt the it takes a village mindset, it takes a village to impact workplace performance, we are in a much better position to measure collective contributions in the workplace performance ecosystem, including, but not limited to, training and development as an experience and L&D as a function. That way we tell credible, reliable, relevant stories about how the ecosystem is coming together with business goals at its center to help the business achieve goals.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kevin. And finally, the final word goes to you, Becky.
Thanks. Think more like a business person, a little bit less like a teacher. As an ex-teacher myself, so that's a challenge. And I think the other thing is stop saying you need a new LMS. You need new technology. You don't need a dinosaur on wheel.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Becky. Let's give a round of applause. Let's get the emojis going crazy for your panelists today. Kevin M. Yates, Becky Willis, and Jess Almlie. Thank you all. And to you, our jurors and audience, thank you all for joining us on the Learning and Development Podcast Live, for getting involved, for all your chat and your contributions. What's left for me to say is court dismissed.